Have you ever noticed how the people who achieve true freedom in life are often the ones who learn to walk away from everyone who tried to keep them small? There exists a profound and sometimes uncomfortable truth about human relationships that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. A truth so powerful that when you finally embrace it, everything changes. Today we explore this truth through the extraordinary teachings of Minamoto no Yoshitsune, the legendary Japanese warrior philosopher who discovered that genuine freedom only becomes possible when you develop the courage to abandon those who cannot support your highest evolution. What Yoshitsune understood about the necessity of strategic abandonment will transform how you view every relationship in your life and give you permission to finally choose yourself over the comfort of others. Before we dive into this life-changing wisdom, I need you to engage with this community right now, because what we're discussing today requires courage. And courage grows stronger when we're not walking this path alone. Hit that like button if you've ever felt trapped by the expectations of people who claim to love you. Subscribe to this channel because we're building a sanctuary for those brave enough to choose authentic living over social approval. And most importantly, comment below with the phrase, "I choose my freedom," because I want to know you're ready to embrace the challenging but liberating path we're about to explore together. Yoshitsune's understanding of abandonment began with his own brutal experience of being cast out from his noble family at the age of 10, an event that initially seemed like the worst thing that could happen to him, but ultimately became the foundation of his extraordinary life. Born into the prestigious Minamoto clan during a time of violent political upheaval, young Yoshitsune lost everything when his father was killed and his family scattered to the winds, leaving him alone in a world that had suddenly become hostile and unforgiving. Rather than being raised in the comfort and security of his noble birthright, he was sent to live among Buddhist monks in a remote mountain monastery, completely cut off from the world of privilege and connection he had known as his natural inheritance. The young boy, who had once been surrounded by servants, teachers, and family members, found himself in an environment where his former identity meant nothing, and his survival depended entirely on his ability to develop inner strength and self-reliance. What seemed like abandonment and exile became the crucible in which Yoshitsune discovered the most important truth of his life: that freedom begins not when others choose to support you, but when you develop the strength to support yourself, regardless of who stays or goes. During those early years of forced solitude and discipline, Yoshitsune observed something crucial about human nature that most people never recognize because they're too busy trying to maintain relationships that are slowly suffocating their potential. He noticed that the people who claimed to care about him the most were often the ones most invested in keeping him safely contained within their limited vision of who he should be. The relatives who occasionally visited spoke constantly about the importance of accepting his reduced circumstances, of being grateful for basic survival, of not reaching beyond what they considered realistic for someone in his position. They meant well, but their well-meaning advice was actually a form of spiritual poison that would have kept him trapped in mediocrity for the rest of his life. Yoshitsune realized that these people weren't trying to hurt him deliberately, but their own fears and limitations made it impossible for them to support his emergence into something greater than what they could imagine for themselves. This led to his revolutionary insight that true compassion sometimes requires the courage to disappoint those who would rather see you remain small and manageable than watch you become magnificent and unpredictable. The monastery where Yoshitsune lived became his laboratory for experimenting with the principle of strategic abandonment, while the other novices formed comfortable friendships based on shared complaints about their circumstances and mutual agreement to remain satisfied with minimal achievement. Yoshitsune began practicing the art of emotional and spiritual independence. He stopped seeking approval from his peers when they couldn't understand his intense dedication to training. He stopped trying to convince the senior monks that his unconventional approaches to martial arts and philosophy had merit. He stopped wasting energy on relationships with people who were more comfortable with his limitations than excited about his possibilities. This wasn't cruelty or antisocial behavior, but rather the development of what Yoshitsune called sacred selfishness. The understanding that your first responsibility is to become the person you're capable of being, even when that journey requires you to outgrow the people and environments that once felt like home. As Yoshitsune's skills and understanding developed far beyond what anyone had expected, he faced a choice that every person serious about their own evolution must eventually confront. He could remain in the safe, predictable world of the monastery, maintaining harmonious relationships with people who would never challenge him to reach his full potential. Or he could venture into the unknown world beyond those walls, knowing that his growth would inevitably create distance between him and those who preferred him as he used to be. The choice he made changed not only his own destiny but the entire course of Japanese history. And it holds profound lessons for anyone struggling with the difficult decision of whether to prioritize personal growth over social harmony. Yoshitsune chose freedom, and freedom required abandonment of the familiar. He left the monastery not in anger or rebellion, but with the clear understanding that his purpose was larger than the container that had protected him during his formative years. This decision was not about rejecting the value of what he had learned or the people who had cared for him, but about recognizing that gratitude for the past does not create an obligation to remain imprisoned by it. Yoshitsune understood that every stage of growth requires the courage to leave behind the version of yourself that others have become comfortable with, even when that leaving feels like betrayal to those who cannot understand your need to evolve. The principle that Yoshitsune discovered applies directly to the relationships in your life right now, and recognizing its truth will fundamentally change how you navigate the complex world of family expectations, friendship dynamics, and social obligations. Consider the people in your life who become uncomfortable when you start setting boundaries, pursuing goals that they consider unrealistic, or making choices that don't align with their vision of who you should be. These individuals might claim to have your best interests at heart, but their resistance to your growth reveals that their attachment to you is based more on their need for you to remain predictable than their desire for you to become fulfilled. Yoshitsune teaches us that loving someone sometimes means being willing to let them be disappointed in you, rather than participating in your own diminishment to keep them comfortable. In your family relationships, this principle might mean accepting that your parents' concern about your unconventional career path comes from their own fears rather than objective assessment of your capabilities. Their warnings about taking risks might feel like love and protection, but if their advice consistently leads you away from the activities that make you feel most alive and authentic, then following their guidance is a form of slow, spiritual suicide. Yoshitsune discovered that true filial respect sometimes requires the courage to honor the potential your parents gave you, rather than the limitations they're asking you to accept. The complexity of this teaching becomes even more apparent when we consider how modern society has conditioned us to believe that loyalty means never changing, that love means always agreeing, and that family obligations supersede personal authenticity. Yoshitsune's experience at the monastery taught him that these beliefs are not only false, but actively destructive to human potential. He observed that the monks who had been at the monastery longest were often the most resistant to new ideas, the most committed to preserving traditions that no longer served any useful purpose, and the most threatened by anyone who demonstrated capabilities beyond what they considered normal or appropriate. These senior monks weren't evil or malicious, but their investment in maintaining the status quo made them unconscious enemies of growth and innovation. Yoshitsune realized that every environment contains people who function as antibodies against change. Individuals whose psychological survival depends on keeping everyone around them operating at familiar levels of limitation and predictability. In your friendships, applying Yoshitsune's wisdom means recognizing that people who consistently drain your energy, discourage your ambitions, or expect you to remain at their level of comfort and achievement are not friends, but anchors. The old saying that you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with is not a metaphor, but a literal description of how human consciousness operates. If you're surrounded by people who have accepted mediocrity as their ceiling, their energy field will continuously pull you back down to their level whenever you try to rise above it. Yoshitsune understood that protecting your own growth sometimes requires the difficult decision to limit contact with people whose presence makes it harder for you to access your highest self. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or judgmental toward those who operate at different levels of consciousness and ambition, but rather recognizing that your time and energy are finite resources that must be invested wisely if you want to fulfill your potential and make meaningful contributions to the world. Think about how you feel after spending several hours with different groups of people in your life. Notice which conversations leave you feeling energized, inspired, and more connected to your own possibilities, and which interactions leave you feeling drained, confused, or somehow diminished. The people who truly support your growth will challenge you to think bigger, dream larger, and take actions that align with your authentic values and aspirations. They will celebrate your victories without reservation and offer encouragement during your struggles without trying to convince you to settle for less than what you're capable of achieving. In your romantic relationships, these teachings reveal why so many partnerships that begin with passion and possibility gradually devolve into comfortable stagnation or constant conflict. When one person in a relationship commits to serious personal growth, while the other prefers to remain unchanged, the partnership becomes a battlefield between evolution and status quo. Yoshitsune's approach suggests that true love requires both people to support each other's highest development, even when that development leads them in directions that feel threatening or incomprehensible. If your partner's love is conditional upon your remaining the same person you were when the relationship began, then what they love is not you, but their own sense of security and control. The fear of abandonment that keeps many people trapped in relationships that stifle their growth is actually a fear of discovering their own strength and capability. Yoshitsune learned that the security we think we get from maintaining connections with people who limit us is actually a form of prison that prevents us from discovering what we're truly capable of achieving, when we're no longer constrained by others' expectations and fears. Perhaps the most challenging application of Yoshitsune's philosophy involves recognizing when you need to abandon entire communities or social circles that have become incompatible with your authentic self. This might mean leaving a religious community that demands conformity over spiritual growth, a professional network that rewards playing small over genuine contribution, or a social group that bonds through negativity and limitation rather than possibility and expansion. Yoshitsune understood that some environments are inherently toxic to certain kinds of people, not because they're evil, but because they're designed for different levels of consciousness and ambition. Trying to remain connected to these environments while pursuing serious personal development is like trying to grow an oak tree in soil that's only capable of supporting weeds. The process of strategic abandonment that Yoshitsune mastered is not about becoming selfish or uncaring, but about developing the wisdom to invest your limited time and energy in relationships and environments that support your highest evolution, rather than sabotage it. He discovered that when you stop trying to maintain connections with people who drain your vitality, you create space for relationships with individuals who actually enhance your capacity for growth, contribution, and joy. This principle requires tremendous courage because it often means disappointing people you care about, facing accusations of selfishness or superiority, and walking through periods of loneliness as you transition from relationships based on familiarity to relationships based on resonance and mutual inspiration. Yoshitsune's life demonstrates that this temporary loneliness is not the price of freedom, but the entrance fee to a quality of relationship that most people never experience because they're too afraid to let go of connections that no longer serve them. The transformation that occurs when you finally implement these teachings is both immediate and profound. Within days of beginning to withdraw your energy from relationships that drain you and redirect it toward people and activities that inspire your growth, you'll notice changes in your mental clarity, emotional stability, and creative output. Problems that seemed insurmountable when you were constantly managing the needs and reactions of people who couldn't support your evolution suddenly become solvable when you have access to your full energy and attention. Goals that felt impossible when you were surrounded by people who questioned your capabilities become achievable when you're connected to individuals who assume your success rather than predict your failure. But the deeper transformation occurs on the level of identity and self-perception. When you stop allowing your choices to be governed by the comfort level of others, you discover aspects of yourself that have been dormant for years or even decades. Talents, interests, and capabilities that were suppressed in order to maintain harmony with people who couldn't appreciate them begin to emerge and flourish. You remember dreams and ambitions that you abandoned, not because they were unrealistic, but because pursuing them would have required you to disappoint people whose approval you valued more than your own fulfillment. The practical application of these teachings in your daily life begins with an honest assessment of every significant relationship in your current world. Start by noticing how you feel after spending time with different people. Do certain individuals consistently leave you feeling energized, inspired, and more connected to your own potential? Or do they leave you feeling drained, confused, and somehow smaller than you were before the interaction? Do the people closest to you celebrate your victories and support your ambitions? Or do they subtly undermine your confidence and discourage your growth with words like, "Be realistic," "Don't get your hopes up," or "You should be grateful for what you have"? Yoshitsune understood that the people who truly love you want to see you flourish, even when your flourishing takes you beyond their ability to understand or control your journey. Begin implementing Yoshitsune's wisdom by gradually reducing the time and energy you invest in relationships that consistently pull you away from your authentic self and highest aspirations. This doesn't require dramatic confrontations or burning bridges, but rather a quiet redirection of your focus toward people and activities that align with the person you're becoming, rather than the person you used to be. Start setting boundaries with family members who cannot discuss your goals without expressing doubt or criticism. Limit social media exposure to content and people that inspire growth rather than encourage comparison or negativity. Choose to spend your free time in environments where your authentic interests and values are welcomed rather than tolerated or ridiculed. As you create space in your life by releasing relationships that no longer serve you, you'll discover that the universe abhors a vacuum and will send new people and opportunities that are aligned with your elevated vibration and expanded vision. Yoshitsune found that as he moved away from people who kept him small, he naturally attracted mentors, allies, and companions who could match his level of commitment and support his extraordinary ambitions. The same principle will work in your life once you develop the courage to stop settling for relationships that require you to diminish yourself in order to maintain them. I want to pause here and speak directly to those of you who are feeling resistance to these ideas because you believe that abandoning people who limit your growth makes you selfish or ungrateful. This resistance is evidence of how deeply you've been conditioned to believe that your primary responsibility is to manage other people's emotions rather than honor your own potential. Yoshitsune discovered that this conditioning is one of the most effective ways that mediocrity perpetuates itself across generations. By convincing capable people that pursuing their authentic path is somehow cruel to those who prefer to remain unchanged. Let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this before responding in the comments below. If someone you cared about was trapped in a burning building, would you stay inside with them to avoid hurting their feelings? Or would you do everything in your power to get both of you to safety, even if they resisted? The relationships and environments that keep you small are burning buildings, and staying trapped inside them to avoid disappointing others is not love, but a form of mutual destruction. Comment below, I deserve freedom, if you're ready to stop sacrificing your potential to maintain the comfort of people who would rather see you remain limited than watch you become extraordinary. Remember that freedom begins when you abandon everyone who asks you to be less than who you're capable of becoming. This doesn't mean becoming isolated or antisocial, but rather becoming discriminating about who deserves access to your time, energy, and inner world. Yoshitsune's teachings remind us that your first loyalty must be to your own evolution and authentic self-expression, because only when you honor your own potential can you truly serve others from a place of genuine strength and inspiration, rather than obligation and resentment. The legacy of Yoshitsune's approach to strategic abandonment continues to influence Japanese culture and philosophy centuries after his death. But more importantly for you, it provides a roadmap for creating a life of genuine freedom and authentic accomplishment in a world that profits from keeping people small, dependent, and afraid of their own power. If this exploration of Yoshitsune's wisdom has stirred something deep within you, if you've recognized patterns in your own life where you've been sacrificing your growth to maintain relationships that drain your vitality, then you're ready to take the courageous step of choosing your freedom over others' comfort. Subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell because we're creating a community of people who understand that real love sometimes looks like disappointing, those who would rather see you remain small and manageable. But more importantly, I want you to take action right now by commenting below about the specific relationship or situation you're ready to abandon in service of your own authentic development. Are you finally ready to stop trying to convince family members who will never support your dreams? Are you prepared to end friendships that consistently pull you into negativity and limitation? Are you willing to leave environments that reward conformity over creativity and growth? Whatever commitment you're making to your own freedom, share it in the comments because your courage gives others permission to choose themselves too. The cruel truth that Yoshitsune discovered is also the beautiful truth. Freedom begins when you abandon everyone who cannot celebrate the person you're becoming, and that freedom is worth more than all the approval and security that keeping you small could ever provide.